So let's start with Confucius. Confucius came on the scene during China's Warring States period, time of civil conflict where many warlords carved out tiny states by waging endless war on one another. Confucius recognized that there was a need for a new way of doing things, new norms, and new rituals that allow for a greater level of cooperation and unity. Before Confucius, historically, Chinese rituals were largely transactional. You offer a god something, and the god gives you something in return. And people still have this kind of relationship with the idea of God. They think of God as an agent or an actor that they can make a deal with, or they can pray to and ask for something, right? Oftentimes in China, the entity you'd be making a deal with would be an ancestor. And so the quality of your ancestors becomes important because people with better ancestors have better help. When they try to make deals, they'll be helped by people who are more capable, by spirits that have more to offer in return. So if someone comes from a good bloodline, that would be suggestive that you should want them in charge because they'll be able to make more effective deals on behalf of the community. But Confucius insists that this is all a mistake. Rituals must be performed for their own sake, with a sense of reverence, expecting nothing in return. Now, to persuade people of this need for something new, he argues that at some point in the past, things used to be much better because people used to do the rituals this way. Now, the historical evidence does not suggest that people used to do these rituals in this way, but Confucius says that that is historically the case, because by invoking history in this way, that causes people to pay attention. Oh, ancient people, wise people, they understood it this way. Maybe we should too, because the time in which we're alive is terrible, and there are things about the past that we think maybe we're better, right? In this way, Confucius uses this conservative impulse that he recognizes in the society to actually do something very radical, to actually change norms and rituals fundamentally without people even realizing that that's what he's doing. Now, why are rituals so important? Well, for Confucius, performing rituals, and this doesn't just include, say, religious rites, it also includes, all of the formal norms of behavior, just treating your parents with respect, treating your friends with respect, treating other citizens in the right kind of way, right? All of these social norms and niceties, they're important because they inculcate certain positive qualities in people. And there are 5 virtues that are key for Confucius. The first is benevolence, interacting with others with a sense of what is good from their perspective, right? This is not just do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is think about what other people would find good, and not what they would want, what would be good from their perspective. Then you've got righteousness. Righteousness is steadfastness in the face of temptation. It's very similar to moderation or temperance in the Western canon. Then you've got ritual propriety. This is sticking to the rituals, both in your actions and in the spirit with which you perform them, right? So even if you continue to perform the rituals, if you lose the reverential spirit, this is a failure of ritual propriety. The attitude is part of the ritual and can't be detached from it. Then you've got wisdom. Wisdom for Confucius is skillfully evaluating situations along with other people and their acts. We might use a term like prudence here, paying attention to what's specific about the concrete situation you're in, not just applying principles in a kind of ham-fisted universal way. And then we've got finally trustworthiness. Trustworthiness is being sincerely public-minded in a way that inspires the trust of others. Sincerely public-minded. For Confucius, it's the sincerity that people can detect in you that makes them trust you. You have to actually be sincere. Now, a gentleman in Confucianism recognizes the need for these rituals and follows them with genuine reverence. The gentleman is sincere, practices ritual propriety, follows the rituals. But a sage is able to understand the true purpose behind norms and rituals, enabling the sage to reform them and even to introduce new rituals when necessary. Now, I think this has a lot in common with Aristotle's theory of habits. But Confucius died half a century before Plato was born, on the other side of the world. So it's certainly not the case that Aristotle is influencing Confucius. It's possible that Confucius somehow influences Aristotle, but unlikely, because Aristotle is writing before Alexander the Great's conquests. And Alexander the Great's conquests create a lot of contact. So if there's interaction, it would probably come after that point, and there would be some meeting in the middle. Now, since you're performing these rituals for their own sake, expecting no material reward, it no longer matters if your ancestors were famous or powerful, because they can't do anything for you. And you're not supposed to look to them for something in return. So as long as you perform the rituals in the appropriate way, you can acquire the virtues. And if you have the virtues, then you deserve to be listened to. Most gentlemen will serve both their families and their state, and the duties to the one are balanced by the other. So instead of an individual versus a collective, the notion here is family and state, both unities, both abstract collectives, and it's two unities that are balanced against each other. But of course, a sage goes further than this, comprehends and serves the thing in itself. Now, the reason I turn to Confucius from Aristotle is that I think that Confucius and Aristotle are both very practical in their motivations. In some respects, Confucius is more like Aristotle than he is like Plato, because there's so much emphasis in Confucius on spelling out rituals, norms. Because he focuses so much more on laying out specific rituals than he does on discussing the ultimate purpose they serve, some people get really confused about Confucius, and they think he's just rigidly committed to a set of arbitrary rituals that no longer suit our time and place. I think you have to bear in mind that Confucius thinks that most of the people that he's engaging with have the potential to become gentlemen, but not sages. So most of the teaching is directed to the possible gentleman, not the possible sage. The possible sage has capacities that are so great that the possible sage will be able to detect this other stuff in a text that's been written principally for gentlemen. The sage is not going to be impeded by the fact that the text is focused around the gentleman. Confucius, I think, on his own theory, is clearly a sage engaged in a project of reinventing Chinese society. And ultimately, his aim is to replace this warring states period where you have this warring, struggling competition with a devotion, reverentially, to abstract unities, to the state and the family. So we get out of competition, we get out of thinking of ourselves as individuals, and we get into greater levels of abstraction. So Confucianism was picked up by the Chinese state and made explicitly politically the state ideology in a way that Platonism never straightforwardly was in the West. Platonism, insofar as it came into politics in the West, it always came in a mediated way through other traditions that included lots of other non-Platonist elements.